Hey, 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 good afternoon, good morning, good day, good night, everybody, wherever you are, whenever you are. My name is Victor Provost. I'm a jazz musician. I think that's what people call me. I am a percussionist. Some people call me that. Um, I play a unique instrument. I play an instrument called the steel pan. And it's a unique and special instrument in a lot of ways. I could spend the next 30 minutes just talking about the instrument and how it was developed and why I think it's amazing. But I'm not going to do that because this is alternative venues for jazz. So I want to talk a little about my experience as a jazz musician and where that came from, where I came from, and kind of how my music came about. Hi, Michelle. Um, So I was born and raised on the island of St. John in the United States Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands is, of course, along with Puerto Rico and Guam and some other territories in the Eastern Pacific, kind of the last bastions of American colonialism. And I'm a beneficiary of that colonialism. I'm the first to admit it. My parents left the east coast of the United States and kind of put down roots in St. John in the 1960s, and they bought a little piece of land. They pointed. There was no access roads or electricity or anything. They just kind of pointed to a place on the map that had a little square and said, can we buy this piece of bush, essentially? And my father cleared it and started building a house, and I grew up in that house in the bush, um, listening to all the music that my friends were listening to. So I grew up. I was listening to a lot of soca, a lot of calypso, a lot of reggae, zouk and compa, um, merengue. Music from all over the Caribbean. The Virgin Islands is kind of right at that nice 45-degree angle in the Caribbean chain. So we get it from both directions, from Jamaica and Cuba and Jamaica and Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then we get it from Trinidad and Martinique and Guadeloupe. All this music coming at us from both sides. Um, and I started playing piano when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, just kind of playing at it with my fingers. My father would show me what notes to play. He could play some songs, like he could play For Elise, and he could play Mercy, 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 Sentimental Journey, nice little easy listening songs. And he would show me which notes to press down so I could make the same songs he did. And I did that for a few years until they got me into some classical piano lessons. Bradley M. Strong, what's going on, man? They got me into some classical piano lessons, and I did that for a while. They said I was good. Um, I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have, and I didn't practice as much as I should have. But what the piano did for me is it introduced me to this instrument that I have spent kind of the latter part of my life dealing with on a daily basis. So one day I was downstairs at the St. John School of the Arts, and the St. John School of the Arts is one room. It's just a one-room building, little kind of old. Exactly what you're imagining is like the old time school, schoolhouse. There was a room upstairs and a basement downstairs. The basement was the office, and there was a little upright piano in the office. And I was down there practicing for my piano lesson, trying to get something together, or was supposed to be practicing. I was probably learning some other song by ear or something. And I heard this music coming from upstairs, and so I went upstairs to see what this sound was. It was powerful. It was energetic. Um, it was exciting. It was like all of the things that I wasn't getting right in that basement by myself at that piano at that moment. And so I went upstairs to see what was happening, and it was all my friends, all my friends from school were in this room, and they were playing on these instruments, these drums, right? These metal drums. Everybody's probably heard this instrument at some point. So they're all playing in the steel pan, right? Different sizes, different And the instruments are different sizes, and the people are different sizes and different shapes, and it's just a beautiful and amazing sight because it's a real communal experience. It's a real community. Um, and so I found like there was one adult in the room, or maybe two, and so I found one, and I said, "Hi, my name is Victor, and I'd like to learn how to. Can I do this? Is there auditions, or how do you join?" And she just handed me some sticks, and her name was Ruth Frank, Sis Frank. She just handed me some mallets, some sticks with some rubber tips in the end. And she said, "Well, there's an instrument over there. You can just go stand next to Barry and watch what he's doing." And that's how this instrument is taught traditionally. Um, it was developed on the island of Trinidad. It's part of a continuum of African drumming traditions that developed on the island of Trinidad. It started with skin drums. When skin drums were banned by the colonial government, by the British government, the Afro-Trinidadians in particular moved to something called tambour bamboo, where you beat different lengths of bamboo stick and stock on the ground, hit them with smaller sticks, and you get this beautiful kind of like polyrhythmic, almost polyphonic sound, but it's definitely polyrhythmic. It's just a great groove. And bamboo was eventually replaced by just random metal parts, you can't even call them instruments. It might be like a biscuit tin or a dustbin lid, or an old part of an old car, or just whatever you could find that was metallic that would make a sound if you hit it. And around in the 1940s, Trinidad was a major oil producer for Great Britain during World War II. And so these oil drums kind of become ubiquitous on the island. And at the same time that making music with found metal instruments is becoming popular, these oil drums are becoming popular as well. And so the transition from found instruments, from biscuit tins and lid covers, etc., moves very naturally onto the oil drum. And these boys, these young boys, 13, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old Afro-Trinidadians, descendants of chattel slavery, they take these containers that it's industrial waste containers, right? They take these empty oil containers, and they figure out that by hitting them in a certain way, in a certain place, by hitting them enough and sculpting them enough, you could get a sound, a distinct pitch, right? A direct pitch from it. And then if you do it on the other side, you get another pitch. So the very first thing they figured out is, hey, we can have like two notes on this one drum, which is a very unique thing on a single playing surface, right? It's not like a balafone or like a vibraphone or a marimba, where you have a bar that's a pitch, and then you have another bar that's another pitch, and another bar that's another pitch. This is one solid playing surface with nothing separating except surface area. They discovered that you could put multiple pitches on this instrument. And then it was just a race for innovation, right? Like, you might hear from your neighbor that like so-and-so had put 3 notes on his drum. Okay, well now you want to go home and put 5 notes on yours. And it continues on like that until it's a fully chromatic instrument, right? So now we have a fully chromatic instrument. Now we start expanding the range of the instrument, until it is, it's still a very, very new instrument. I see somebody called Facebook user. That means you didn't give Stream, what's this thing called? StreamYard, your name. It's all good. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us. So it's a chromatic instrument. It's a very new instrument in the annals of musical instruments. It's like 70 years old, right? So lots of our musical instruments are hundreds of years old, thousands of years old. And so it's still very much in development today, right? It's still kind of experimenting and tweaking with it, but there's a level of standardization that has kind of that has become understood. And so this instrument, again, was developed out of nothing. It was developed out of Nani, what's up, man? Nani, it's great, great, man. It's good hearing from you. Um, so this instrument was developed from nothing, and then it came into fruition. It came into out of a mandate for playing, for cultural expression, for members of the African diaspora in the Caribbean, to express themselves, to participate in daily cultural life. And then it was I call it a misunderstood instrument, because then it was kind of co-opted. Right? It was co-opted. It This instrument grew up. The steel pan grew up at around the same time that the American travel industry and the European travel industry and vacation industry grew up. And so generations and generations and generations of Americans and Europeans travel to travel to the Caribbean, they travel to Trinidad, they travel to Jamaica, and they see these instruments. And so now they immediately associate it with vacation music, right? Oh, I remember I heard that when I was on a cruise and it made me feel so happy. And I love hearing that. That's great. Like, it's amazing that just the sound of this instrument can give you that feeling. But it is a bit of a misunderstanding. I mean, it takes the backstory out. It takes the power out of the power out of the story. The fact that that these young boys, they didn't have any education. They didn't have any prospects for education. They weren't metallurgists. They hardly knew anything at all about music, right? They certainly were not musically literate. They didn't know what to name things. All they knew is what they heard on the radio and how to get those sounds out of this metal. And so they spent their entire lives doing it. And they would get chased by police. They get chased by their neighbors. There would be rival neighborhood gang fights over who has the best instrument. Some real life, like West Side Story type stuff. But now the gift is this instrument called the steel pan. So just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to ask Gail to help me while I share this. I'm going to share this video clip, and I probably should pick someplace really good to start it. Let me see. Yeah, someplace where I'm playing. There we go. So now you can see kind of what it is and what it looks like. All right. So I know you'll be able to see it. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it as well. right. So that was a composition of mine entitled 1733. That was from a concert, online concert that we did earlier this year at the Public Playhouse here in Maryland. It was shot. The video was shot by the incredibly talented T.L. Benton, and we had a great time that night. So yeah, there was this that I hope that I hope the audio came through. My pivoting a little bit now. So this is the instrument that I grew up playing, and I grew up listening to all of this Caribbean music. But then and we would learn everything by rote, right? I said that Miss Frank said, yeah, go take these sticks and go look at what Barry is doing. And that's exactly what happened is I went and stood next to him, and I tried to see what notes he was playing. His hands were moving fast, and I was like trying to listen and figure out where all these things were. And then by the end of the class, like I had learned that piece of music. I learned that song, right? So you learn everything by rote and repetition. And one day, the instructor, right, the person that's giving us the music, the arranger, his name was Rudy Wells, who was an amazing man, an incredible musician, and one of the originators of this art form, right, of the steel band. Mr. Wells came in and started teaching us his lines. And it was hard. It was fast. It was difficult. It required a lot of dexterity. But he was in the right key though. And we just did that for like an hour and a half. Just the first like 4 measures of the intro to Spain. Rusty, what's up, my man? Just the first 4 measures of the intro to Chick Corea, Spain. We played that for an hour and a half. And I went home and I told my father, I was like, hey, we have this, we're learning this song sorry, someone's knocking. So we're learning this song in steel band and it's called Spain. And my father was like, yeah, I have this record called Return to Forever. And I was like, yeah, cool. Can I hear it? I wanted to hear what the original song was. I wanted to hear what this thing was that we were playing, because I'd only ever heard like 25 kids in a room with steel bands playing it. So I wanted to hear the original music. And yes, of course, I'm definitely talking about innovators like Othello, Andy, Bugsy, even earlier ones, Kobo Jack. Yes, I would love to. And Rudy Wells, I already mentioned him. So I started going through my father's record collection. I just picked up things, right? The first thing I put on, doom 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 doom, right? That Miles, there's that something else, the Autumn Leaves, Miles and Cannonball, and I was hooked. Like immediately. I listened to that record over and over again, start to finish. The Getz and Gilberto record. He was a huge fan of South African music, so he had all of this music from Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Lucky Dube, who else? Of course, Bird, Coltrane. So I got hooked on these jazz musicians, right? These jazz records. I wouldn't tell my friends, right? Because my friends were listening to jazz. We were listening to party music, right? To calypso and soca and dancehall and whatever shabba ranks that we were listening to. So I had that going on in this year, and then in the right ear, yes, and Ellie Manette, of course, I would love to, and Cliff Alexis and so many others. Thank you guys in the chat for pulling my coat. So in my left ear, I have all these jazz records. And then in my right ear, I have all this Caribbean music that includes, the music by incredible steel pan players, people that have, these. Not only did they invent this instrument, but then they invented how to play it. They invented how to play it and how to improvise on it. They invented a whole language of improvisation, on this instrument that didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think that's so remarkable. So to answer your question, and I can't see some of your names, so I have to apologize. But one of my favorite earlier improvisers on this instrument. His name was Emmanuel Jack, Kobo Jack. They call him Kobo Jack, and he was amazing. They all learned by ear, but had incredible musicianship. Turn your phones off, guys. Turn your phones off. But all had incredible musicianship. Some of the earliest pan records, like steel band soloist records, the pan soloist records, because this is a communal instrument, like I said. So you really come out of playing as a group. You come out as playing as a group, right? You come out, it's a band experience. And there's only a few, right? There's kind of a select few that get to be soloists, right? They get to stand up in front of a rhythm section or by themselves without the rest of the band and play, right? Play melodies and improvise. And so there were some early records that if y'all are interested in checking out, if you can even still find them, I'm sure that you can. They were called Pan Assembly, P-A-N-A-S, however you spell assembly. Pan Assembly, right? And this was like an R&B rhythm section, right? Or like a jazz rhythm section, right? So like electric bass, guitar, keyboards, and drums and everything. And then steel pan was the soloist, right? Was the lead voice, right? So there was no saxophones, there was no trumpets, none of that. And so I started listening to these records. I got these records, and they were covering, it was all cover tunes, right? So they would cover like Mr. Magic, Feel So Good by Chuck Mangione, Caught Up in the Rapture by Anita Baker, just like real good, like crossover R&B type jazz, smooth jazz, whatever that means. And they were playing so much stuff, man, and just blowing and improvising. And it was such an inspiration to me. These are guys like Earl Rodney, Ken Professor Fillmore, Bugsy Sharp, who is, I put him above. He's an incredible musician. Who else was on those records? Ray Holman. Ray Holman was on those records. So just an amazing array of pan soloists that got me thinking, like, man, okay, so I can play this instrument and treat it like the same way that Cannonball is treating his horn, right? Like let me go back and see what Cannonball is doing though, and see if I could pick up some of that language, right? And do the same thing, but like with the same rhythm section, and then I could play out front, and then maybe I could make it a vibe. And then when I was in high school, like maybe 94, I think 1993, 1994. I don't remember exactly when the record came out. I bet Bradley M. Stone knows when this record came out. But Paquito de Rivera, Dave Samuels, and Andy Norell kind of tri-headed a group. I think it was really Dave's group called the Caribbean Jazz Project. And this group had several iterations for the next few years, but they put out 2 records. And the front line was Dave Samuels, Andy Norell, and Paquito de Rivera. And Andy Norell is a name that I had been familiar with already for years, because in terms of putting out very high quality recordings of steel pan music that was available in the United States, that was available in the United States Virgin Islands, Andy Norell was kind of like one of the only names. It was Pan Assembly and Andy Norell. And maybe if you're lucky, you could get like a bootleg recording of Bugsy Sharp, or maybe something by Ray Holman. But these were just very, very high quality recordings. And so I saw Andy's name, and even by that time in high school, I'm still going through my journey. So like, I didn't really recognize anybody else on the record. I'm ashamed to say I didn't recognize Paquito's name at that time. And I didn't recognize Dave Samuels, but I got this. I begged my mother or my father, both of them, to get it for me off Amazon. And the record came, and that was it for me. It was everything I wanted was in those 2 records. There was one called Caribbean Jazz Project. Another one was Island Stories, right? And this was music from every part of the Caribbean, right? So they might play a song and it would start out as like a rumba, right? And then halfway through the song, it would change to like a calypso. And then the back half of the song might be a merengue, right? Or the first song would be would be a bomba, and then the next song would be, you know, a mazurka, right? So every island in the whole Caribbean, every musical culture was being covered by this band at the highest levels. It was like Oscar Stagnar on bass, Mark Walker on drums, Dario Eskenazi on piano, and then I think Pernell Santanino played percussion on a bunch of those records, and of course Paquito, Andy, and Dave. And I'm listening to you know, kind of all of this conversation between Paquito, Andy, and Dave, and I'm thinking, I recognize, by the time I'm in high school, I recognize that like Andy is coming from a school of improvising that's self-contained and self-actualized, right? In that he's improvising on this new instrument um, that doesn't have a long tradition of belonging in this kind of setting. And so I'm checking that out. And then I'm listening to Paquito, and I realize that like, okay, he's coming out of like the Bird, kind of the same school as like Cannonball and Bird, right? More of like a bop oriented approach. And then Dave Samuels is kind of like right in between those two things. So man, I absorbed those records. I absorbed every part of those records, and I was so surprised and lucky. A few years ago, 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago. Now, Paquito called me to make a gig that Andy Narell couldn't make. And he called me and said, "Hi, Victor, my name is Paquito de Rivera." And I was just like, "Yeah, man, whatever. Who is this? Who is this for real?" And he said, "No, I want you to come and play this concert with me down in Chile. It's going to be the Music of the Caribbean Jazz Project. Have you ever heard it?" And I was, you know, I told him, I said, "Man, I could sing every solo on every instrument for every record, because that's all I listened to the entire time I was in high school." Who else to talk about? Otello Malanu. Otello was an innovator. He was from Trinidad. Otello and I have a very special connection for a number of reasons. But you know, not the least of which is the fact that he invited my mentor Rudy Wells to the Virgin Islands from Trinidad. Otello was living in St. Thomas and playing some gigs there, and he saw some opportunities for Rudy Wells to come to St. Thomas and make some music. So he invited him up, and that's how I got started. But Othello, one of the first records I heard Othello on were Monty Alexander and Ivory and Steel, right? And there was I think a series, maybe 2 or 3 records called Ivory and Steel, from Monty. And again, it was Monty doing his thing and Othello doing, you know, Othello was the soloist. He was, you know, playing changes, you know, not just like the kind of the same blues scale oriented or like pentatonic scale oriented thing that I was used to hearing on the instrument. He was dealing with changes. So it was really inspirational. Of course, Othello went on to work very closely with Jaco Pastorius, and like just kind of a who's who of music. Taj Mahal. I'm gonna forget. You know, I can't name everybody who's played with. But these guys, these were innovators. Othello Malanu, Ray Holman, Andy Narell, Boogsy Sharp, just a little bit older than me, a fella named Liam Teague. And man, you know, I have like a minute left, maybe a minute and a half. So I want to take this opportunity first to thank Gail Boyd for inviting me. I actually invited myself. I emailed her. I was like, I think I should be on your thing. And she was so gracious. But I want to spend that time just kind of shouting out some of my kids. Robbie Greenidge, oh, the touch. Robbie Greenidge, thank you. You know, Robbie is an amazing musician, an arranger and composer, and just a beautiful person. But I would, you know, these are names that people know, right? So I want to take just a minute and shout out like some names that folks might not know, and hopefully you'll run into them and see them soon. So I want to shout out, and forgive me if you know me and I know you and I don't say your name. I don't have enough time to remember and I didn't write it down. But I want to shout out first a couple of my former students, LJ Brathwaite and Dominic Lewis. They are playing their butts off on this instrument and innovating in all kinds of new ways. Shout out to Aviel Scanterbury, also on the island of Trinidad. Andre White, amazing player. Kareem Thompson, amazing player. Devon Stewart, amazing player. These are names that, we're just a generation into this thing. So we all still look up to Robbie and Bugsy and of course Liam Teague, the inimitable Liam Teague. We look up to these guys. They're like the celebrities, right? The pan celebrities, and we're kind of doing our own thing. But they deserve recognition. They deserve recognition. Hey, Vonnet, oh, thank you. That was very sweet. So it's 5:31. Gail said it's not a hard 5:30, but I'm in the middle of a sound check. Kareem, Andre, Devon, Liam, there it is. I just said them. I said all the names. I got it all. So that's my name. That's my website. Scrolling down here along the bottom of the screen. This is very difficult because it's the opposite direction. I would love if you went to my website and checked out my music. I have some records out. I put out a record on Sunnyside a few years ago called Bright Eyes that I'm very proud of. I'm in the process of recording a brand new project, collaborating with the wonderful pianist Alex Brown. Alex is a great friend of mine, and we collaborate often. Go to my YouTube page and my Facebook page and my Instagram page. It's all Victor Provost Music. So it's very easy to find. And if I wanted to mention your name and I didn't, I apologize. You can, I don't know, yell at me later. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do now. So I think if I say goodbye, then Gail is probably going to just turn off the stream. So goodbye.